Sumer is the first civilization in the history of mankind, like the title says, the first great city-states, ruling over great lands, living like their glorious and beautiful cities could never fall. The makers of the first written words in the entire world, and the first work of fiction. But how did we get here? Where the heck did the Sumerian civilization come from? From 5500 BC, the area was formerly home to Thebaid culture, who were some of the first to use a fair amount of copper, leatherworking, and inherited pottery from the Hassuna and Samarra cultures. They were mostly Semitic, ancestors of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Arabic populations. Their greatest settlement for thousands of years was Eridu. Its patron gods were Enki, god of water, knowledge, and creation, and his consort Damkina, goddess of the mountains, who will both integrate the Sumerian pantheon, specifically the Anunnaki, which means sons and daughters of Anu, god of the sky. Yeah, these people had the habit of pretending that their respective deities were responsible for creating the cities. Meanwhile, the thousands of workers who gave their entire lifetimes were ignored. Eridu was home to astounding temples of a scale and beauty never seen before. It had a variety of professions, like farmers, metalworkers, and merchants, all ruled by a priest who lived in the largest temple of the time. Two of the sites that the Ubaid founded were Ur and Uruk. The latter will achieve a greater size when two settlements merged in 4000 BC, the start of the Uruk period. The population of some of the surrounding settlements reached the shocking number of 0, while Uruk had the fastest growing rate of the world until then. The sites at Uruk were excavated in the 30s, when dating techniques were way less accurate than they are today. So we don't know a lot from 4000 to 3500 BC. And from this period, we only know much about two temple districts dedicated to Sumerian deities, the oldest one being the Anu district, previously called Kulaba, being one of the most important sites of the previous period. It had a massive terrace with successively receding stories, being 12 meters high at the time. It was called Ziggurats of Anu, dedicated to the sky god, with a stone temple built right next to it. The largest one was the Inanna district, to the glory of Inanna, goddess of love, fertility, and war, the queen of heaven. She will be the inspiration for the later Canaanite and Phoenician goddess Astarte, who gives name to the Space Marines of the English fictional universe of Warhammer 40k, the Astartes. The district had a series of temples built across the centuries, the oldest one being the Stone Cone Temple, with beautiful mosaic walls made of, you guessed it, stone cones. And this district in specific is the one deemed as the first true civilization, due to the construction of monumental architecture and the invention of proto-cuneiform writing, sometime around 3500 BC. The earliest text we know of is the Kish tablet from the city of Kish, home to Ishtar, who was an alternative version of Inanna. After 3500 BC, the late Uruk period bears the high technological development that is resembling of civilization, with stamp seals used to authorize documents and verify a merchant's identity. They adopted the metallurgy of bronze, 3300 BC being the start of the Bronze Age, which was applied to tools and warfare through time, slowly becoming the norm, and the invention of the wheel, the most important improvement for transportation. At this time, it housed up to 25,000 people. Part of them came from an unknown location, referred to as Blackheads, the word for this title being Sumer. It is believed that they would have come from North Africa or from the east, either from the Indus Valley or from China. and they will slowly reach important roles in society. This is the part where some will speak about aliens to explain the quick progress and innovation of Sumerian society, but it was most certainly the consequence of two cultures merging peacefully and focusing on developing their economy and technology rather than envying or stealing from each other. Uruk had urban agglomerations similar to those of a modern small city, with professionals like farmers, merchants, or artisans, ruled by priests, scribes, and administrators, who were all ruled by a priest-king who lived in the largest temple of the time, a proto-king of sorts. The limestone temple was built in Iana, reaching a great size of 76 by 30 meters, even larger than the Parthenon of Athens. And the astounding White Temple was built on top of the Anu ziggurat around 3450 BC, covered with a white gypsum plaster that reflected sunlight like a mirror, making it visible from multiple kilometers away in the Sumerian plains. The workforce and hierarchy needed to build these wonders of the archaic world were something never done before. Their importance was worthy of the construction of surrounding walls. The political power of Uruk reached the rest of Mesopotamia, which is implied by the sudden spread of Urukian architecture and pottery. Yeah, if you didn't know, the name Iraq has its origins in the word Uruk. After all, Uruk is located in modern-day Iraq. They reached as far as the north of the Levant, and it is believed that their architecture and writing influences reached Egypt itself. Some settlements were violently invaded, like Tel Hammukah, which had its original dwellings burned, followed by the construction of Sumerian buildings, technically the oldest battle that we know of. These centuries saw Uruk reaching a peak size of 2.5 square kilometers and up to 80,000 people. They were mostly reliant on farming for nutrition for more than 1,000 years, making the average height of men go from 175 to 160 centimeters tall, and the women from 165 to 155. Although they lost a fair amount of their athleticism, they were responsible for many technological improvements anyway. A tablet from 3100 BC speaks about the daily wages of beer for workers, implying that some form of food salaries had already been invented. I want you to appreciate that working for others was already a thing, but some Sumerian administrator might have invented wages. I love you, Sumerian citizen. The time after 3100 BC, known as the Jemdet Nasser period, will see the decline of Uruk as the capital of Mesopotamia. The risk of conflict generated the need for a non-religious leader, but rather a military one, someone of imposing physique and charisma, elected by a popular assembly of exceptional or successful men, rather than a widespread democracy. But it very quickly delved into a dynasty, the creation of the concept of a king in multiple Sumerian cities. Some of them will be called En, meaning Lord, and others will be called Lugal, meaning Great Man. In 2900 BC, the raid or siege of Uruk would take place, maybe done by the resistance from other settlements, which will make it the earliest known independence war. The period after that will be known as Early Dynastic Period, having cities like Lagash, Umma, Kish, and Ur rising to a population and power equal to Uruk, which managed to rebuild stronger, all of them becoming city-states without knowledge of the concept of a border. One of the many Lugals is believed to have been called Gilgamesh, like the one spoken of in his epic, ruling Uruk between 2800 and 2500 when a great wall was built around the city, but we don't know for sure. In 2700, conflict raged between Enmere, Enmevaragesi, king of Kish, and the kingdom of Elam in the east, known as the Sumer-Elam War, the first documented war. The Sumerians were the invaders, motivated by scarcity, probably winning and creating resentment within the Elamites. The city of Nippur between Sumer and Akkad had Enlil as patron god, being the god of air and wind, and the greatest and oldest of the Anunnaki, equal to Zeus in status, allowing the city to prosper due to the respect it had from all of the other ones, despite not having a military lord. From 2500, conflict raged between the city of Lagash, home to Ningirsu, god of farming, law, and war, and the city of Umma, home to Shara, also a god of farming, but of irrigation as well. Nippur and Enlil attempted to prevent this conflict by drawing a border, but economical hardship seems to have motivated Lagash and Umma to wage war anyway, the former of which seem to have been mostly victorious for the following 150 years. Sometime around 2400 BC, the Elamites, in revenge, will invade Ur, home to Nana, god of the moon, also the city described as the birthplace of the prophet Abraham in the Bible. Elam toppled the first dynasty of Ur, only to be beaten the living heck off by King Eannatum of Lagash, who will become the Lugal of the Sumerian plains, which many other lords agreed to. The motivation for this alliance seems to have been the sudden prominence of the Kingdom of Egypt, who had successfully managed to conquer all lands surrounding the Nile River by 2400 BC and had built some big pyramids. Around 2360 BC, the hegemony of Lagash will be challenged by King Lugal-Sagesi of Umma. He aimed to unify all of Sumer under one banner, first carrying out a successful campaign to conquer Uruk and Ur, and then striking the throne of Lagash, ruled by King Urukagina. A Lagashian scribe described the raid as a lament. He has ruined the barley of the fields, destroyed the bricks of Lagash, committed a sin against Ningirsu, offense that was known in Urukagina, king of Girsu. But as for Lugal-Sagesi, governor of Umma, may his god make him carry his sin upon his neck. He then defeated every single Sumerian city, from Kish and all the way to Eridu. Around 2350, Lugal-Sagesi moved to Uruk, founding the third dynasty of the city, becoming the king of the first true kingdom of Sumer, ruling for a few dozen years while strengthening the Sumerian economy and military. But Sumer would be threatened by Akkad, in specific Sargon the Great, a man who didn't content with just a kingdom. He wished to rule all over the people of the world, to become the first emperor of mankind. But that will be in another episode. Well, it wasn't until 2100 that the poems that will become part of the Epic of Gilgamesh will actually be written. I'm actually thinking about summarizing the epic, which I really love. Spoiler, it doesn't really have a happy ending. That's it, now you know that the first Sumerian city rised in 4000 BC. Many Sumerian cities gained power in 2900, that the kingdom of Sumer was united in 2350, and that the Sumerians really liked their gods. Subscribe, like the video, and all the usual YouTuber stuff. Ciao!